Good morning. My name is Claire Clark and I'm from Dynham. We are supporting Highlands and Islands Enterprise to deliver this event today. It's great to have you all with us for this NEXUS webinar. A very warm welcome to you all. Before I pass you over to Andrea McCall from HIE, I'd just like to spend a minute explaining how we will run today's webinar. As an audience member, you are automatically muted, but we have a couple of ways for you to get actively involved. You can use your question box at any point throughout the webinar, and we will pick up as many as we can during the Q&A. You'll also see an icon called the raised hand icon, and during question time, if you've got a mic and you want us to take you off mute so you can connect directly with our speaker, then just click on that icon and we'll get you connected. And finally, we always want to promote knowledge sharing and collaboration, so we do record every session. We will, of course, share the recording after the event, so you can watch again or share with anyone else you think might be interested. That's all from me now. I'll pass you over to Andrea, who will introduce today's speaker. Andrea.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for the introduction. Yes, hello, I'm Andrea McCall. I work in the Life Sciences team at Highlands and Islands Enterprise in Inverness. And I just want to give you a quick introduction to our NEXUS webinar today. The NEXUS webinars are an opportunity to find out more about what's going on in the life sciences and technology community in and around Inverness and the wider region and the wider country. And NEXUS is our co-working space that we operate on Inverness campus in Solister House, where life sciences and technologies collaborate and co-locate. So the NEXUS webinars are just one way of us keeping in touch and sharing knowledge, as Claire was saying there. So I'm delighted today to welcome Jenna, who's our speaker today. Jenna works as a research associate at SRUC, and she's actually based at the Easterbush campus near Edinburgh. And she is really talking to us today about a research study that she has conducted. And the research study was led by Safari. So I think Jenna is going to talk about that in a minute in more detail, but it's basically a consortium of research organizations. And we were fortunate to work with Jenna as kind of the lead researcher on the study. And we're just looking forward now to hearing from her on all the work she's done and all the things she has found out on the aquaculture, animal health and agri-tech sector in Scotland, which is quite a big sector. So looking forward to hearing from Jenna just now. Over to you, Jenna.
Great, thanks for the introduction, Andrea. Just to check, can you see my screen okay before I start?
Should be your screen sharing now. Yeah, that's perfect, Jenna. Thanks. Okay,
perfect. Thanks, Claire. So as Andrew said, I'm going to be talking over the next maybe 15 minutes about some work that was conducted over the last maybe kind of 12-16 months, and I was scoping out the animal health, agri-tech and aquaculture or AAA sector in Scotland. So as I say, the AAA stands for Animal Health, Agri-tech and Aquaculture. And the AAA sector is important to both life sciences and technology sectors. And it's also really important for the agriculture and farming kind of sectors as well. And this underpins Scotland's high-performing food and drink sector. It's been a number of years since the last large scoping exercise or map of the sector was conducted, which means there's little validated, up-to-date information on what exists across Scotland in terms of the AAA sector, and also what its contributions and global impact are. So this piece of work, as Andrea said, was funded by Safari. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Safari, they're the Scottish Environment, Food and Agricultural Research Institutes, which is a consortium of 6 research institutes based all across Scotland. And these deliver the Scottish Government's strategic research programme. These include BIOS, James Hutton Institute, Morden, the Rower Institute, Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, and SRUC. And they deliver KE as a knowledge exchange and impact through their Safari Gateway. So this fellowship was in collaboration with Safari and Life Sciences Scotland Industry Leadership Group. and Highlands and Islands Enterprise. And this industry leadership group has a subgroup which covers the animal health, agri-tech and aquaculture sectors. And members of this group include academic institutes, enterprise agencies, ScotGov representatives, innovation centres, and key kind of players within the sector. And the aim of this group is to champion and promote the sector within Scotland. And this is chaired by both Andrea and John. So the aim then of this work and this fellowship was to map the AAA landscape in Scotland. And this was carried out pre-farm gate, and also identify competitive strengths and opportunities. And this was achieved through 3 tasks. The first of which was reviewing the current landscape and looking forward for what's planned in the future as well. The second task was identifying the strengths, opportunities and challenges in the sector, and this was achieved using a survey that was circulated to key stakeholders. And then the third task then was a mapping exercise of trial facilities that exist. And this work acts as a platform which further exploration of the sector can be built upon. So in terms of the definitions for each of the 3A, so animal health was health interventions that improve the health of livestock and companion animals. Agri-tech, the development of novel technology for agriculture, ensuring improved productivity and sustainability. And aquaculture, which was the breeding and rearing of fish, shellfish, plants, algae and other organisms in water environments. So I thought I'd just start by giving just a brief overview of kind of facts and figures of the AAA sector in Scotland. So one of the largest concentrations of animal and veterinary science expertise in Europe and the world exists in and around the Easterbush campus. There are 2 internationally rated veterinary medicine schools, with a 3rd one planned, which I'll come on to in the next couple of slides. Scotland is a global leader in veterinary science publications in relation to GDP. Intelligent Growth Solutions, or IGS, and James Hutton Institute installed the first vertical farm in Scotland. The breakthrough Barbavax vaccine for Barber's poleworm and the first commercial vaccine against parasitic disease in cattle were both developed in Scotland. Dolly the sheep, which was the first clone mammal, was created at the Roslin Institute in 1996. The University of Edinburgh and SRUC ranked top in the UK in REF, which is a Research Excellence Framework for Agriculture and Veterinary Sciences in 2016. And SRUC and the University of Edinburgh remained top in the UK based on research power for the 2021-22 results that came out recently. The University of Stirling is also home to the Institute of Aquaculture, which is the largest of its kind in the world and was established in 1971. So as part of the mapping exercise, over 210 key stakeholders were identified, and this was up to date as of the end of October 2021. These are from a wide range of backgrounds, including academic, industry, innovation centres, centres of expertise, charities, and this map just shows the geographic spread of each of these stakeholders, and you can see that a large proportion of them are based in and around Easterbush campus, which, as I said, is the European epicentre for animal biosciences, but also there's a large proportion based in and around the Highlands. But it's worth noting on this map that this just shows the kind of main sites, or the main sites for each of these stakeholders. But if every satellite site or satellite facility were included, numbers would be much larger across all of Scotland. So started off if we start off just looking at the academic excellence, so just worth noting that each of these have been split into, say, academic, each of the 3As individually as well, and I'll talk through some of what exists across each of these. So, as I say, this illustrates the academic excellence across the AAA sector. Now, these are just some examples, and by no means all of them that exist. And some of these academic institutes work and operate in just one of the 3As, some of them might be in 2, and some of them work and have expertise across all three of the A's. And this just illustrates the academic strength that exists across the sector. So, apologies. In my opinion, one of the really big assets that we have are the underpinning research facilities. And there's a really wide range of them that exist, and more of them can be covered just now. But these represent just a few kind of examples of what exists. So if we start at the top right, and then go clockwise around. So the top right then is SRUC's green cow facility, based just outside of Edinburgh. And this is a world-class facility for measuring enteric methane emissions from cattle, and allows us to measure emissions from individual animals. We've conducted work that's carried out testing of feed additives to reduce methane emissions, proxy measures to measure methane emissions, and also work that's involved the rumen microbiome and also genetics. And if we go down then, we have SAMS, which is the Scottish Association for Marine Sciences, and they are a marine robotics facility which operates the latest state-of-the-art technologies for marine research. We also then have the James Hutton Institute's two new centres, which is the International Barley Hub and Advanced Plant Growth Centres. They've recently started operating and attracting startups, but the main infrastructure is going to be complete next year in 2023. The aim of these centres is to develop and revolutionise crop production. And then the bottom left shows the new Large Animal and Research Imaging Facility, or LARIF, which is based at the Easterbush campus. And then the top left is University of Aberdeen's International Centre for Aquaculture Research and Development, or ICARD. And they have extensive expertise in fish nutrition, feed formulations, immunology, and vaccine development. As I say, that's just a really brief overview of what exists, and there's much more that's out there than can be covered in a short period of time. So as part of this mapping exercise as well, each of the non-academic stakeholders were split into smaller categories, which I'll briefly go over in the next few slides. So each of these includes subcategories, and the number of stakeholders are given underneath each of them. So for example, on this slide, 22 stakeholders were identified for veterinary. So for the first of the three A's, animal health, includes large expertise in veterinary, genetics and genomics, consultancy, nutrition, gene therapy, water treatment systems, cell cultures, contract research organisations, and drug development and production. Again, we can see a really wide range of expertise within the agri-tech sector within Scotland. And this includes sensors, robotics and cameras, drones, UAVs and satellites, IoT, so Internet of Things and intelligent systems, consultancy, data and AI, material suppliers, alternative systems, including things like vertical farms, molecular technologies, software and apps, and controlled environment farming. And similarly then for aquaculture, lots of expertise within the production, and this covers fish, shellfish, plants and algae. There's also stakeholders with expertise in water quality, breeding and genetics, consultancy, technological innovations, and aquaculture, health and welfare. There's also lots of stakeholders outside of these broad categories already mentioned, which sit within their own kind of subcategories in their own right. And these include innovation centres and centres of expertise, networks, consortiums and co-ops, science parks, charities, accelerators and venture studios, and government and development agencies. So you've seen from the last few slides, there's a lot and a really wide range and breadth of skills and expertise across stakeholders as part of the current AAA landscape. There's also a lot that's planned in terms of projects, hubs and centres coming over the next several years, which shows that the sector is still rapidly expanding. So these include the dairy nexus and digital dairy value chain. And this will be based at SRUC's Barony campus and aims to boost collaboration and innovation within the dairy sector within the kind of region. It'll be a state-of-the-art facility that aims to decarbonise the dairy industry and forms part of the Borderlands Inclusive Growth Deal, with additional funding from UKRI Strengthen Places and the South of Scotland Enterprise. And this will include, say, new technologies, new labs, pilot facilities for biorefining dairy waste, and developing new products. There's also a new agri-tech hub that's planned for the Easterbush campus, and this aims to establish Edinburgh as a data capital of the world, and will use data to develop health and genetic innovations in the animal health and aquaculture sectors. There's also a new SRUC Rural and Veterinary Innovation Centre, which will be based on the Highlands and Islands Enterprise Inverness campus, and will create and support development of new and existing SMEs to grow. There's also SRUC's new veterinary school, which will be the first new veterinary school in, I think it's over 150 years in Scotland. And equally then, keeping along the SRUC theme, we will also be having a new vertical farm that's dedicated to education and knowledge exchange. It'll be the first of its kind in Scotland, and this is going to be built on the King's Buildings campus in Edinburgh, and I think it's hoping to be built later this year, if not early next year. There's also then the Seed Pod, which will be a new centre of excellence and development hub, which is planned to open, I think, next year in 2023 on SRUC's Cravestone campus. Royal DSM have a new feed plant that's planned to produce Bovie, which is a feed additive which can reduce methane emissions from cattle. And finally then, there's a new centre for agricultural sustainability and innovation, so CASE, which will be located at James Hutton Institute's Balruddery site and provide a platform for facilities for testing new agri-tech technologies and innovations. So as I mentioned earlier, we conducted a survey as part of this work, and this was circulated to key stakeholders to identify key assets, resources and strategic expertise, identify the unique selling point of the sector. We also collected information on key collaborations, both within Scotland, across the wider UK, and then also worldwide. And we also asked what opportunities are available. So this included what's currently available, what opportunities and support we'd like to see becoming available, and also then what are the current challenges facing the sector. So things like COVID-19 and Brexit, how have they impacted the sector, or have they opened up opportunities? So I'll just briefly touch on just a really brief overview of the results, just kind of a key, highlight some of the results. So we asked respondents what new opportunities are becoming available to the sector. And the most popular ones, or the most kind of common responses, were sustainable production systems, the use of agri-tech and digital innovations, big data and analytics, and green recovery. And this is to help reach UK targets of net zero by 2050, or the Scottish targets are reaching net zero by 2045. We also asked then what areas could be improved upon within the sector. and the main responses included improved collaborations and partnerships, improved communication, particularly around the strengths and skills that exist in the sector, which also links then to appreciation of value of the science, research and impact of the work that goes on. And I just think the survey highlights a vast kind of breadth and expertise of the sector. And we just need to be a little bit better about shouting about the great work and skills that exist. So in terms of recommendations from the survey, now this is just a brief overview, but the recommendations were increased funding opportunities and financial support dedicated to the sector, increased support for communication and promotion of the sector and its impact, both within the science community and to the wider public, increased training and upskilling across the sector. There's a need for a dynamic regulatory board or regulatory body for new innovations. It was noted that there was a lack of coordination of funding and resources, leading to a bit of a disjointed AAA sector. So a more organised approach is needed. And then also there's a lack of dedicated test facilities and trial facilities for new innovations. So that's just a really brief overview of the work that we conducted over the last little while. But just to give a little plug, all of the information of this is available in our report. So yeah, give it a read. And that's it from me.
That's great. Thanks so much, Jenna. We're just going to move to audience Q&A now. I've invited Andrea back on, and we've had a couple of questions submitted, which is great. Thank you. There's still time, so use your chat box and submit any questions that you'd like to ask Jenna. But we'll just kick off with a question from Kirsty. Are there barriers to uptake for technology use? If so, what are they?
Yeah, there's quite a few barriers to uptake. I think somewhat unsurprisingly is the cost of the systems, particularly for if the technologies the farmers invest in by themselves. I think there's a real spectrum of kind of uptake of technology. I'll give examples, apologies, for just the kind of ruminant side of things, because that's more my background rather than aquaculture. But I just think that you might have some really progressive farmers that are really clued into kind of technology, understanding the benefits, and some which have no kind of interest at all. We did a little bit of work with Safari again a couple of years ago, and Morden and Agri-Epicenter that was looking at research priority areas for the beef and sheep sector, and it was coming out in there that there's a real lack of understanding of return on investment. So I mean, I think it's seen that there's this big kind of upfront cost of a couple of £1,000, say, for this piece of technology, but I don't think that it's seen as being over the long run you could save all of this kind of money, and that if you're improving efficiency, using resources more efficiently, and things like that, I think that there's a lot to do, I think, in terms of selling kind of what systems we have. Obviously, I think that's just more for the farmer kind of purchasing ones, as opposed to something like animal health, maybe for treatment, say. But yeah.
Great, thanks so much, Jenna. Okay, another question in from Kevin is, have you got a sense for which of the 3 A's is the biggest or the most active in Scotland?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there's quite a bit of overlap between the 3 of them, and I think that all of them are operating, lots of companies and stakeholders operating within each of them. Oh, that's a good question. I think maybe animal health might be one of the largest ones, because I think that covers kind of livestock, but also companion animals as well. So yeah, at a guess, I think, they're all equally strong, but I think at a guess it would probably be the animal health side.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jenna. Next question from John. One of your survey recommendations was increased training and upskilling. What were the main skills identified here?
So the main skills were around the use of data and kind of data analytics. So I guess that kind of ties into the agri-tech side of things. But I think that the upskilling was around kind of existing stakeholders. So, like people that you and I say that already work in the sector, but equally increasing the data skills for, say, school-age children, students and things like that. So, like the next generation that are kind of coming into the sector. It wasn't mentioned in the survey, but I think maybe also electronics and software engineering and coding, and they're the kind of main big ones that are coming up, and I think that they're applicable across all three of the A's as well.
Great, thanks, Jenna. Okay, I think we've had one more question in. So yeah, if anyone's got any other questions, just send them across and we'll get them to Jenna. But yeah, here's a question from Karen. You talked about new opportunities for the sector and sustainable production systems and green recovery net zero ranked high. How does the AAA sector help contribute to that?
That's a good question. I think it's all about using resources kind of more efficiently across the set. That might be, say for example, JHI's new 2 centres, breeding of climate resilient crops, for example. Also, say for technology, it could be indirectly through improving animal health. So just for example, if you have an animal that's producing either meat or milk, ill health means that there's poor production. In the case of, say, beef animals, you have, if an animal is ill, they grow a lot less quickly, which means that, they're on farm for a lot longer, which means that, they're producing a lot more methane for being on farm for that time. And also then obviously there's a longer time to slaughter, which means that, you have more reliance then on feed and bedding and indirect things like that. So I think it's all about using kind of on-farm resources a lot more efficiently. There's a lot of work done using kind of carbon footprinting tools and carbon calculators. So just as an example, there's AgriCalc, which is SAC Consulting's kind of carbon footprinting tool. And there's also one that originated out of Aberdeen called Cool Farm Tool. And these are really important for benchmarking. And even if you look at them kind of year on year, you can see how, for example, using technology to improve health covers 2 of the A's, for example. You can see how that then impacts on your farm emissions. And in the case of AgriCalc, it can give it as a kind of unit per product emission. So, if you're looking at it as, say, per, litre of milk or per kilo of beef produced and things like that. So I think it's really useful to have, I think it's all about improving resource use efficiency and reducing your carbon footprint that way.
If you don't mind, I was going to come in there as well, because just to add to what you said there, one of the kind of key discussions that we had at the E3 Scotland conference at the end of April in Edinburgh was around, waste within the system as it exists. Like 30% of all food is wasted somewhere along the line between production and consumer, and that's a lot of efficiencies there that could be made at different stages. It depends obviously where your food is produced, which country, where the biggest waste is, but I guess as just improving the current workings in the food system without necessarily always using new technology is something that can easily be done, hopefully very quickly, and improve things as well. And I think there was a good example of just use of data that exists already. I think it's a project that SRUC and Inverness was working on with pig farmers in Scotland, but just making sure that the data they already gather is just used in a more, cohesive way and, shared between stakeholders as well, help to reduce, I think, the carbon emissions by 40%, which is amazing. That didn't take anything kind of groundbreaking necessarily. It was just using things in a clever way and coordinate the actions, I think, as well, which is important. So.
I mean, there's I think it's going to be either next year or the year after that's coming out that all cattle in Scotland have to be tagged using an electronic identification. Sorry, that's not even English. So it's been for the last maybe 10 years, the sheep have to be tagged using this EID, this electronic tag, but for cattle it'll only be coming in kind of next year. But that shows great potential for, increased data that, you'd already be, as a farmer, say, gathering as part of your day-to-day operations, say. So yeah, I think there's lots of examples of great things that are coming out across the sector.
Great, thank you. We've had a couple of questions from Mark from 4C Design, so I'll start with his first one. We worked on barber vacs to help scale and commercialisation. What appetite is there from academics to actually commercialise their research?
That's a good question. I think that I didn't kind of touch on it, but it did come out in the survey that I think that there needs to be, there is a lot of appetite for it already, but maybe there needs to be a little bit more support around that kind of translation from the academic to actual commercial product. I mean, I know there's, quite a few academics say they work on the disease side of things, and, Morden, for example, would have contributed towards that or led on those those vaccines. But yeah, I think that there needs to be some more support, I think, to get that kind of translational research from the academic kind of side of things over to commercial products, I guess, or things like that.
Okay, and then follow-up question from Mark. Sorry, Andrea. Sorry, you wanting to?
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to come in on that one as well. Yeah, I think the universities all have departments that to support commercialization of research, but I don't think you can forget that it depends on the individual as well. Not each and every researcher will be interested in the commercialization process. That's maybe not why they went into the sector in the first place. So you want to support the ones that have the ambition, but I always think there should be another mechanism to take the ideas that are generated and commercialize them in a different way. We always call them the orphaned projects that could be taken on by someone else who has the skill set, or a team of people who have the skill set to commercialize those ideas.
Great, thank you. Okay, follow-up question from Mark. What support is there for organisations to develop products from TRL2 onwards? We developed numbnuts and struggled to gain any traction in Scotland, and we had to lean on Australia for support.
So I don't know, Jenna, if you've got anything to add there, otherwise I could come in on that one.
Yeah, I think probably better you. I'm more of an academic than pure academic rather than that, so that's a little bit outside my expertise. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not familiar with numbnuts, unfortunately, so I don't know what the background is, or what the technology even is, but there is obviously support through different types of economic development agencies within Scotland to support with innovations. And again, I don't know where the barriers kind of ended up being in Scotland that you felt, Australia was actually more helpful. So I don't know if that was to do with access to markets or access to funding. I mean, it's not an easy journey to commercialize products from, as you say, the TRL2, so technology readiness level 2, which is very early on, it's just straight after the idea, really. And I think that comes back to what was coming out in Jenna's research as well, that there is funding available and support available, but maybe it is not such an easy landscape to navigate through and find, the right support at the right time. And I think, as I said, I think that came out in the research that it was more coordination, I think, is probably necessary to make that a smoother journey for everyone in there.
Great, thanks, Andrea. Okay, next question from Robert. Animal health appears to have a majority of veterinary stakeholders, whilst aquaculture appeared to have no specific veterinary stakeholders. Given the welfare and health challenges of farmed fish, is this not a concern?
I'd have to go back to check, but I think that might have just been the way that I might have split that across the kind of different subcategories. I mean, some of the animal health veterinary side of things would also have expertise in the aquaculture. As I say, I think there's a lot of overlap between a lot of the 3As. But no, there's definitely companies that are out there. And I mean, if you would we be able to send around a link to the report as well at some point afterwards? But in the report anyway, you know, there's there'd be quite a lot of information on each of the individual companies, and some of those would be focused on the veterinary side for the aquaculture side of things as well.
And yeah, just to add again, there's a huge interest obviously around fish health and the different diseases, and you know, aquaculture is a relatively new industry if you compare it to livestock farming. So I think everyone is really focused on getting to grips with all the different diseases that are out there, and huge amount of research and also veterinary work is going into that. So I think, as Jenna was saying, I think that was just a way of how you split it up in the report, really, isn't it?
Okay, great. And we've got one more question, and this is from Karen. You mentioned that we should be better about telling the world about the good work, what does go on in Scotland. What are the plans to do this?
Yes, so obviously the work that Jenna has done was kind of supported by the AAA subgroup of the Life Sciences Industry Leadership Group, and the group will now take the results of the survey and the report, and I suppose decide what to do next. You know, as an industry leadership group, we can obviously just make our own decisions, I suppose. And we have talked about before that actually in order to really shout about what we have in Scotland, we in a way needed this piece of research to be done first. So we have some evidence base, and we have company lists and research facilities, all the different assets we have that we can shout about and tell people in the world about. So it's a really fantastic resource for us to have this now and take it forward. So watch this space, hopefully.
Great, thanks, Andrea, and thanks so much, Jenna, for your time today. That was a really, really interesting presentation. Thanks so much. I'll just pass you over. I'll just pass you back over to Andrea, who will say the last few words.
Yes, thank you, Claire. I just wanted to thank Jenna for just presenting the results for us today, and she's done a lot of work on the survey and on pulling that report together over many months, so really appreciate her time on this. So hopefully be working with her going forward as well. But if you're looking to find the report online, there's actually 3 places you can have a look. I've got the links up here on the slide. There's we'll include the links also in the follow-up email that you'll all receive, just to make sure you know where to find it. If there's any questions, obviously just get in touch with us. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have a few other webinars coming up, more in the health space, but just in case you're interested, they will all be advertised on the Highlands and Islands Enterprise website. You see the link there on the screen. So there's 1 more in May, and then 3 actually in June before the summer holidays. So have a look and see if you're interested in joining any of those. And one other plug is for our Pathfinder Accelerator program, which is a business support program that supports small companies who want to launch a new product or service or set up a new business, both for startups and for existing companies. And then our next application round closes on the 8th of August. And we've actually recently started a cohort just focused on animal health and aquaculture. So that's been quite an interesting experience to bring some of those businesses together who are specifically in those sectors. So it's great to see them go along their journey, along the Pathfinder journey with us. If you have any more questions, you can email pathfinder@skillfluence.co.uk. And yeah, just look out for the feedback survey after the webinar closes. We really appreciate your views and any ideas you might have for other webinars. That's it from me. So thank you very much for joining. And thank you again, Jenna, for taking us through the survey results today.
That's great. Thanks so much, Andrea. On behalf of Highlands and Islands Enterprise, a big thank you to everyone that came in to join the webinar today. As Andrea mentioned, our post-event survey will pop up straight after this session. So if you can spare a couple of minutes, it would be great if you could complete that for us. Thank you very much for your time and have a great day.